This is Dan Schneider, and this is another show on intergenerational responsibility. I'm speaking with Mickey Glantz, and the conversation will begin in a moment. The subject is generational or intergenerational responsibility on matters close to the heart of the human and the earth. I'm speaking with Mickey Glantz, as I usually like to do. I give my guests a few minutes to describe and tell who they are, what they do, and why they do it. So, welcome, Mickey. If you could condense your life to about 2 or 3 minutes.
I think, yes, well, they'll eventually do that, so I think I'll do it. Anyway, I guess I'm what you call, depending on what chart you look at, I'm part of the kind of the silent generation, or I was born in 39,
Uh-huh.
which is a cusp kind of thing. And a lot of good movies were that year.
Yeah.
I am from Rhode Island, and I went to University of Pennsylvania to be an engineer. I started off as a metallurgical engineer, graduated in '61, and I liked it, but not enough interaction with people. So I went back in a year to get a master's in political science or international relations. I wanted to work for USAID.
Mm.
It was the start of the Peace Corps in that era, and that was my heart. My heart was pretty much at the time pretty worldwide, but central focus in Africa. And so I did a thesis on the anti-colonialism, and that's where I started a lot of my work. When Kennedy was assassinated, the job I had been offered at USAID disappeared, and I went back to engineering and worked for Ford for a while, then went back for a doctorate in political science, international relations, and did revolutions. Got tired of people killing people, and so I said, well, in the early 70s, weather was erratic, and we were talking about global cooling, that after so many millennia of warming, we were due for an ice age. That was the dominant thing, 70 to say 73, 4, 5. A lot of droughts, floods, famines, things like that were going on. And I said, well, I'm going to go work on the people versus nature. And lo and behold, it didn't take long before I found out that people use nature to kill other people. So if you notice a drought and it's in the area of your opposition, you let them die. That's what happened in Ethiopia, and it happened by accident throughout West Africa. And so since then, I've been working on climate, water, weather issues, and society. And a large portion of that has been on early warning systems, and that's kind of one of my big things now. And now it's not so much about the science, improving the science, it's improving society's ability to deal with information, not even just scientific information. But I learned from the pandemic that there was this notion of vaccine hesitancy, where there were enough lies or misinformation about vaccines that many people in the U.S. didn't take the COVID-19 vaccine, and he died.
Yeah.
And I listening to an NPR thing, a radio show on the way home. They were talking about this vaccine hesitancy, and I realized that the same thing happens with weather forecasts, even hazards, tornado warnings, hurricanes, droughts, even seasonal forecasts. And so my feeling is to improve the value of a forecast of a hydrometeorological hazard, climate, water, weather hazard. You should start working at the other end, is how to convince people that forecasts, the government isn't out to kill you specifically
Yeah.
over hazard, that kind of thing. So that's kind of one of my big things. And then that led me to, I've always been interested in involving younger people in work. And then I've been doing some work, and I was asked by the International Red Cross Red Crescent Society if I would be an intergenerational advisor
Mm.
to the young people working in humanitarian hazard assistance and things like that. So that's kind of my last task. and I'm old. And I'm
Uh,
85 now, so
yeah, there are a lot of things there. Let me comment just, I ask you a couple of questions about them. So USAID was one of the first things on the Trump chopping block when he took office again. Uh, I'm probably you're probably someone who is just shaking his head over that. What was your take on that being so early and prominent a cut?
well, to be blunt, I was actually my grant is aid, USAID now.
Uh-huh.
I've been getting assistance from USAID for the past decade or so, and so I my contract was being extended for another eight or so months, and to work on intergenerational issues related to climate water hazards, and it was held up for review. And so from February, and I'm at the University of Colorado, from February, they got a notice that the contract funds were being held back, and I was given a stop work order. In my 85 years of life, I've never had one of those. I've been fired, but I've never had a stop work order.
Yeah.
But so that meant we went into limbo, my group, small group with a big network, global, and we had to take leave. My assistant, main person, went on unemployment, and I just went into limbo as not able to go to the university, etc. And I was basically forced to retire by circumstances. I mean, I'm older, so it wasn't so much about a salary for me, but for other people that I helped. And so what happened is I retired. I considered it a forced retirement. People would say, "Oh, you're 85, just go, forget it." But no, got stuff to do, things to say.
Yeah.
And the day I retired was very recent. It was June 1st.
Mm.
That was officially first day of retirement. In the afternoon of June 1st, I got a letter from an agency saying that my funds had been approved. I don't know how much to say here, but it's labeled as a USAID NOAA project, and it's supported also by NSF. So those three agencies are targeted. USAID was absolutely the first. Now, it's probably because the administration or Musk, among others, they just they saw aid as free money for others.
Yeah.
We were wasting our funds. But as you know, since then, in fact, aid had to have been targeted specially. I mean, that was meant to be first. And the reason I say that is the same day they announced they were letting people go on a Friday, Saturday they were taking USAID name off the building.
Mm.
So there was no going back.
Yeah.
That if they didn't do that for the other organizations, they did that for aid. And and I know many people at aid. The group I worked on disasters. Pretty apolitical, but that's what happened. And now we see that Africa and developing countries, emerging economies, are targeted by our government for some reason I don't understand.
So you were born in 1939. You would have come of age right as Kennedy was taking office, and this was when we're looking to the stars. NASA's ramping up. Intelligence is valued to such a degree that we imported a lot of ex-Nazis, or maybe they were still Nazis
Yes.
at the time, but at least one could say they were valuing intelligence. Now you mentioned the COVID parties and the stupidity of a lot of young people. Then you have people online that seem to be trolling when they talk about flat Earth. I can't believe anyone is serious about that. People deny the moon landing. So in order to talk about intergenerational stuff, how did we get from a society that 6, 7 decades ago we were looking to the stars. We had this energy that mankind has this bright future. To now this people being proud of just being so damn stupid and willfully stupid.
I think communications, I mean, we talk about social media, but I think communication in general has been a major promoter of stupidity, along with other good things. Okay? However, odd, stupid, weird statements tend to attract attention. Squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yeah.
Stupidity also gets things. Conspiracies are something maybe nature. It's in our nature to look for, to be suspect of things, especially governments.
Well, it's evolutionary advantageous. If we're suspicious of a noise in a bush, it could be a saber-toothed tiger wanting to eat us.
That is true. I take it back a little bit earlier than JFK, actually. I mean, a lot of it's personal because really, as I look back, as I now am being older, say, well, how did I get to be this kind of bleeding heart liberal tree hugger that believes in the death penalty in certain cases? Okay, I mean, weird. So how did I get there? And I have in my drawer here, my desk, letters that I wrote or responses to letters that I wrote to Radio Peking in 1952. So now I'm 12. And a lot of it goes back to when my mother, single parented with 4 kids, had the wisdom to buy me a used amateur radio. I used from a relative. They didn't give it to us, a cousin, a rich cousin. We bought it, and I started listening to the world, and to hear something from the Congo, or to hear something from Australia. I would stay up. I've got a logbook, and I never went to sleep. I was just trying to listen to these things. Nothing in mind. I wasn't political. I just wanted to know. I'm talking. I can hear an African and whatever. Someone living in Africa. So for me, it started early. But when you look at charts about different generations, the baby boomers and stuff like that, they give it a period. And they'll say from maybe 1940. Let's see, I've got charts here. 45 to 60 are baby boomers. Mm-hmm. But really, some charts say 42. Because some people started having kids in the army and that kind of thing. And so we're really shared generations. Right now we talk about millennials and Gen Z. But then there are zillennials. They say, wait a minute, I was born on the cusp. I'm partly like them, but I'm partly like, I don't like some of the things they do. And that's very intergenerational. In the workplace, the young people want the jobs of their bosses. There's conflict in the workplace over those generational gaps. It's not based on intelligence or anything. It's just, I want to move up the ladder, or, I should be because my peers are. Even if I don't want to, I guess I have to. And things like that. JFK was big for me because it followed this path I wanted, and the Peace Corps was exciting. That would get me out, not just by radio. I can go. And I had an offer in West Africa for a program, and Africa was my main interest. But I did revolutions around the globe, including Canada and stuff like that, Quebec. I've identified a key point in my life, and each life is different, but Sputnik, because I was interested not in engineering. I was interested in history. I did well in history class. I did badly in math classes and stuff like that. But in 1956, when Sputnik went up, the schools were told, we have to catch up to the Russians. We don't have engineers. We need, and somehow I was from Rhode Island, it's kind of manufacturing with metals and jewelry and things like that. So I was interested in metallurgical engineering. In metals. But when I went to my guidance counselor, I didn't care about any of that. I cared about history. And they basically said, is the equivalent of what's 2 plus 2? 4. You are engineering material. I was young for my age. I said, okay. Hadn't thought about it. I played tennis, whatever. And so then I applied for engineering. And, and then it took me 1 year in engineering to say, this is fun, but it's really not what I want. And I liked it, but it wasn't going to be my life. So that's when I went back for something that would get me back to international.
So, do you think that scientific illiteracy of the general public comes from the fact that science is not something that like many things in the day to day life, is there and is predictable? I.e., you have things like just a few days ago, Donald Trump talked about his damn stupid parade and how it rained, therefore something or other. He was trying to equate it with global warming. You have uh, back in the 70s, you were talking about things that were big then, thinking of an ice age, and now it's global warming. They were talking about the population bomb, and now you have people like Musk talking with this, especially regarding
14 kids.
the death of the white race or whatnot, talking about we need more kids when they really just mean white kids. You had the thing 20 years ago when Pluto was demoted from a planet and Brontosaurus wasn't Brontosaurus. Now Brontosaurus is Brontosaurus again. Um, do you think that it's just too much for your average, even lay person who has a general interest? That, for example, I work in retail, and I remember when whole milk was very healthy and supposed to be good for you 40 years ago. Then for about 20 years, whole milk was bad for you. Now whole milk is good for you again. That people are just not accustomed to be that fluid in their thinking.
I you know, I still have 1 foot in science,
Yeah.
and I have 1 foot in society, and uh, and I worked at the National Center for Atmospheric Research for 34 years, and I ran a small social economic impacts group. But the truth of the matter is, the scientists in general didn't care about the value. They knew there was value to forecasting, value to their research. But all science has value, you could say, but not tomorrow.
Yeah.
Maybe in 100 years, maybe in 20 years, maybe in 5 years. And so I looked at the value side, and I thought there was value into using uncertain information. So why not explain your science in words that are not jargon? And most couldn't do it. And those scientists who did it, like a Carl Sagan, or in climate, water, weather, Steve Schneider, for example, those people were inside the science tent, but marginalized. Okay, they were challenged a lot. I was like, just yeah, here's some small money. Yeah, go talk about the value of a forecast and things like that. That was my first study, the value of a long range forecast. And I found that it didn't have so much value unless you could prepare society for what it is and how to use it. And what do you need? So you can tell the Africans, well, the drought's coming. I'll tell you, here's perfect forecast. Drought is coming in 6 months to West Africa. What would you do? Well, I would ship grain into Dakar, and I would put it on trucks and trains and send it into the interior. I would store it in the interior in villages and things like that. Okay, great, in theory. In practice, no storage facilities in the villages, no trains going into the interior. The port couldn't handle the amount. This has actually happened. And I did a retrospective study. You could do everything in theory, but if they're not prepared to deal with it, they can't absorb the capacity that you're giving, the information, the food, the water, whatever, shipping. Ports couldn't handle it. So if you want to be prepared for these kind of things, society has to belly up to the bar and put money into the social side. The scientific community does its work, and they have their pedestals. Math, I think, is first. I mean, if you're a mathematician, kowtow to you, and then you have the physicists, and then you have the chemists, and by the time you get to the social scientists and the humanities, you guys are useless. So, and the scientists fight among themselves, and there's always uncertainty somewhere. But at some point, even uncertain information can be useful. As for Trump and this recent event, there are lots of examples. His, what was it, the Sharpie Gate? Do you remember that? When there was a major storm forecast for the U.S., a hurricane, and he had a map, and he drew on the map that it went all the way into Mississippi,
Okay.
Alabama, Mississippi. But NOAA came out and said, no, it's not. It's not going to hit that far. It's Florida and Georgia and a bit of Alabama.
Huh.
And Trump has hated NOAA since. Maybe hated it before. And so he's got a bugaboo about NATO because they made him look bad. And in fact, there is this map that he took with him, which I think has been returned to the collection, to show that this Sharpie Gate. Now, the Weather Service forecast no snow in D.C. at one point, became very controversial because it's Congress, and they wound up with 12 inches of snow. Okay. And then some of the scientists and social scientists wrote about that. They were then attacked by their own, not just by a rogue government that didn't believe in science, because you made us look bad. Don't write about that. So there are reasons not to trust the science, but there's a reason also to pay attention to it and not to be a lemming, basically.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to have the parameters. I mean, just speaking of weather, I live in the Texas area, in the Austin area, and we'll get. I mean, generally spring is tornado season, and then the fall is if there's going to be hurricanes coming, there's going to be hurricane season, which can bring some tornadoes. But you now you have these apps, and you can look on your local television station app, and you can see where the clouds have moved from an hour ago to now, and predict. And you can really, if you have the app and you have an internet connection at least, you can hunker down and know, oh no, it's passing 2 miles north of me, I'm safe. Oh no, it's coming directly over us, let's get into the bathroom, kind of thing. But a lot of people, especially if there's some dire prediction, 2 hours before by the local weathercaster that says, there could be a flurry of tornadoes coming with this storm here, watch out. Then it doesn't happen. And they get angry at the weathercasters, the forecasters, for not having the disaster that they could have had. Where to me, it's I'd rather know that it's a possibility and be prepared.
Well, not only that, but for rain, if you look at something, rain, violent rainstorms or floods, you'll get a forecast. And if you go to the people on the street, and they'll say, well, how often is the forecast correct? And they'd say half the time. It's like flipping a coin.
Yeah.
You go to the Weather Service, say 92%. We're right 92% of the time. I said it was going to rain in Boulder County.
Yeah.
I didn't say it was going to rain on you.
Yeah.
I said, and it rained in Boulder County.
Yeah.
You see, so we keep in different statistics and use different measures. And you're right about that. Oh, yeah, we didn't have a tornado. Boy, they screwed up.
Yeah.
Be happy.
Yeah.
I mean, so there are certain disasters. What was it recently? Was it the head of the Weather Service, the newly appointed head? Maybe it's the Commerce Secretary. I can't remember. They didn't. Oh, the head of FEMA. They were interviewing him, and he said, "Oh, he didn't realize there was a hurricane season." Later, they said, "Oh, he was joking." It's like, "Oh no, there's not going to be a black plague."
Yeah.
I'm just joking. Whatever. I knew it. So he covered his butt on that one. So you need the science. And where do those apps get their information?
Right. Yeah.
Someone has got to collect the information. Someone's got to have weather balloons up in the sky. Yeah. They just cut them in half here in Colorado.
Yeah.
Now you not twice a day, but once a day they have weather balloons going up. What does that mean? You can't have a tornado forecast after 5 p.m. because there's no night shift now.
Yeah.
There's no second balloon.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, but all that stuff is based on things that Noah has been collecting for decades.
Mickey, let me open this segment just by asking an odd but straightforward question. Do you believe that the future was more highly regarded in the past? And I say this having been born in 1965 and growing up as in the 1970s New York City public school system. And we were reading books like Alvin Toffler's Future Shock and other things with social predictions of science and whatnot. And most of them didn't pan out, as we talked about, like the
Mhm.
overpopulation and whatnot. But it seemed to me that when I was a child, and probably going back earlier into your era as a young man, there was a more of an interest in what was coming, what could be, whereas now there's always this looking back, this nostalgia, the good old days. Oh yeah, when blacks were lynched, when women then couldn't have abortions, now they can't have them again, and so on and so forth. Do you think that there's an overwhelm of nostalgia that is somehow hindering at least Western society from looking, or maybe just American society, from looking towards the future?
Oh, wow. Look, I remember watching on a round television screen, probably in the late 40s, Flash Gordon. They had episodes. Are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, your picture disappeared.
Oh, sorry.
Anyway, yeah, so I can't see if I'm seeing you. Hold on. I don't know where it is. I don't know where Teams is on my. I can't find you. Anyway, um, I'll assume you're there until you're
Yes.
not. But we were looking to the future. It was like get to the moon.
Right.
The moon was weird, and Jules Verne stuff was hot, was interesting. They were making movies about it in the 40s and 50s and 60s. So there was a looking forward. And then when people talk about the good old days, it's usually about something specific in mind. When people say, oh, the good old days were better than now, they're not really referring to the fact that lynchings were okay. They're thinking about probably in their world different aspects. Of course, lynching was never good and it still isn't. And there probably are some segments of society fringes that think it was a good thing. So I think there is something going on now. We discount the past. We discount the future. I guess like you do with the dollar. A dollar today is worth more than it will be
Yeah.
in 5 years. Well, when you have a hurricane like Katrina and in New Orleans, you tend to think, well, now we're safe for the next 100 years because that
Right.
was a 1 in 100 year event. We don't understand statistics.
Yeah.
You can have 10 100-year floods in a row, hurricanes in a row, major ones in the same place, and then not have anything for a century. So the way we don't understand numbers. We live for today. Most people in the world live for to get through today for tomorrow. We have had the luxury to look far out into the future. When we talk about landing on Mars. That's Musk or some of the outer galaxies. It's not my interest, but it is a piece of our interest. And you have to look forward. You can't just look back. You can't go back. Okay, I have an image that I use of an overweight Superman who's standing on the scale and he's in his stretched out leotards, and cape. And you can't, for some things, you can't go home again,
Hmm.
and we can't go back. But what we've become aware of in the 70s, when the climate started to vary, that, oh, even that isn't stable for us. It's not just one season you have a lot of hurricanes, another season you don't. But we realized that the climate's quite variable, and then we came to realize that we're heating it up.
Mm.
And there are people who still deny that. Imhoff, the senator from Imhoff, brought a snowball, it melted in Congress. And he said, oh, it's really an ice age. It's still
Yeah.
It's no different. We're not warming the atmosphere, regardless of what the thermometer says. And that's kind of discounting the wrong stuff. We tend to discount the past. It's not as, oh, we're smarter than they were then.
Yeah.
And so in my studies of all these disasters, climate, water, weather related disasters for the century, say, what you found is in every report, even the ones in this decade, every report has of an event, a hazard that hit a society or your state of Texas. Every society has a report and it says, here's what we have to do. This is why the impacts were so bad. We must make changes.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6 months later, oh, we don't have the money.
Yeah.
Oh, we had our 100-year flood. In fact, in your state of Texas, you had freeze
Yeah.
a couple years ago. And people died. People were burning their furniture.
We called
to
it
keep
Third
warm.
World Texas. That's the idiot governor that we have.
Yes, and yes on that. But what happened was they said, oh, it's unique, a one
Yeah.
in a gazillion event, but it wasn't. A decade earlier, it had done the same impact to the same power grids, and they were told
Yeah.
to weather-proof the power grid, and they didn't.
Yeah.
And they had some freezes going earlier, where the jet stream would dip down
Yeah.
into Texas, bringing the cold air. So there was a history of it. We collect these. I've written about this. I have stuff on this, and it's called Lessons Learned about disasters. That every report does the theoretical right thing we ought to do, and then most cases they don't do it.
Yeah. Now, it seems to me that not only do people willfully ignore information, but they also don't want to deal with the worst possible consequences. I have this sneaking suspicion that when we talk about we hitting 1 degree Celsius or 1.5 or 2 or 3 degrees Celsius by 2050, and that'll be the point of no return. I have a feeling that a lot of scientists know that we probably passed the point of no return 15, 20 years ago. And we're going to find out in 5 or 10 years, they're going to say in 2035, yeah, it was back in 2005 that we really should have hit those targets. But people don't want to be alarmist, even if there needs to be an alarmist. Now, I'm not saying we're going to end up like the planet Venus. No, we're not going to go there. But we're talking about probably hundreds of millions of people over the next century that will die unnecessarily. We're talking about people being impoverished, probably this causing not only droughts and famines, but the concomitant diseases that come along with these conditions. And because it's going to be mostly in the third world, or even here in the U.S., it's going to be the lower classes that suffer the most. We don't want to talk about it. So let's not get alarmist. Let's not make the people at the top of the ladder feel nervous. So there's this political element to it as well, correct? Would you agree?
Yes, there is. But when the great equalizer probably would be sea level rise.
Yeah.
Aside from hot temperatures, and you can burrow into the ground and build, cities underground like Canada has it for cold winters.
Yeah.
Montreal has another city that's all by subway. Once you're underground, you don't have to worry. So my feeling is that it might. Everything always wars whatever favor people with resources.
Yeah.
So whether it's a war and you have a few pieces of gold in rings or earrings or whatever, it's a resource. A lot of people try to convert their funds into something they can carry. Okay, and so my feeling is I don't really know. Maybe the rich will do well, they have wherewithal maybe to do lots of things. The middle class, whatever that means in America, will suffer. And some people live day to day, some people live month to month, some people live year to year.
Yeah.
And so now they're starting to talk about Social Security is going to disappear as we know it in 2033. Okay, they've come up with this number. And what do you do if then when the social nets are being taken away from the upper classes? You're already almost non-existent for the lower classes.
Yeah.
You see, So why was it? Places are rebuilt. I hate to do this, but racism is still a factor in the United States.
Yeah.
So when Hurricane Floyd hit North Carolina, there's some historic black communities that maintain their solidity, as a community and all that. They survived since the Civil War.
Like the Gullah people, the Gullah language.
Yeah, yeah. So these people survived the hurricane. White communities, also equally affected, also were hit. In 2 years, the white communities were rebuilt. In 2 years, the African Americans are still living in trailers. Mm. So it's just there. I don't know what to say. In some places, it's not going to hit everyone equally, but climate change will hit everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. And whether people will be disgruntled over higher prices for avocados, not because of tariff, but because we want them from some place that can grow them, or we want coffee from some place that can grow it. Maybe they can't grow it. A lot of things are linked to weather. People don't realize when they had the big surges in the 90s and the teens and the 10s of population into the U.S. Coming from Central America, the refugees, migrants, and they were sparked by Hurricane Mitch in Honduras, or in Central America. So when they lose the ability to produce food to feed their families, they migrate.
Yeah.
And so you don't migrate from one poor country to another poor country. We're on the same continent, you go north. So.
Well, it's like, I think one of the major things that annoys me, because I've worked in and out of the food industry for many years, is that when I was a boy, we used to have a thing called seasonal eatings. There were times when grapes weren't available, when cherries weren't available. Now we want to have everything 24/7. It's 3 in the morning. We want to be able to go to 7-Eleven and pick up grapes if we wanted or whatnot. And it's like, we don't need to be importing that. There are plenty of ways to get certain vitamins and minerals from different foods, and it's good to not be dependent upon just one source. I mean, I also remember more than just yellow bananas. There were purple bananas and there were red bananas when I was a kid. But we've moved away from that, thus exposing our food supply to various strains of fungal infections or whatnot that could wipe out all of the Cavendish bananas or whatnot. So it seems to me we don't even plan well in these matters.
Well, it's if you look at the government at the moment, we're getting rid of anything that seems to bring some layer of protection to society. We get rid of whistleblowers, we get rid of inspectors, which we had done earlier as well. Yeah. But now it's almost with a chainsaw, as opposed to, and before it was with a hatchet, not even a scalpel. So we've created this world, like the kids growing up today, the newest generations, the alpha generation, they're going to be totally different than their predecessors because they're totally electronic. They don't, they walk around with an encyclopedia on their phone. Yeah. They don't need to know things,
right?
Because they can instantly find an answer to it.
And the answers are often incorrect. Wikipedia is a morass of misinformation.
Yes. But some of what you need to know is easy to get, and you can verify it or disqualify it. But I'm saying that I was in a restaurant. I've actually been drawing lately. That's one of my, when I retire or if I'm retired, I'm drawing a lot. And there was a kid in the restaurant, and maybe 2 years old enough to hold an iPhone.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and the family's there. There are 8 people and this baby on the end in a high chair.
Mm-hmm.
And the baby's just looking at this. They gave it to her, and she knows what to do.
Yeah.
She's looking at the images, maybe punch something, see something different. And they're all holding their own conversations.
Yeah.
And that kid is just here, play with this toy. And they're wired for that's their future. And to go walk through the stacks, I mean, we used to do it. It was a pain in the ass walking through the stacks of a library looking for your book, the Dewey System.
Yeah.
And you go in the stacks. But doing that, I realized, wait, I saw an odd title, Life in Medieval Cities. Oh, I wonder what it was like.
Yeah.
And it's influenced me ever since, reading those books about medieval cities. That a lot of what we do today, a lot of our customs, come out of the medieval period, and things like that, after the plague and things. So there are things that these kids are not going to get. They're not allowed to go. They have students who go into the stacks to get the book for you. You don't get Rome like we used to.
Well, yeah, I know there's the saying that with Amazon and ordering things online is that you miss out on the books that you don't know that you're missing out on because you're not there going through and just
That's right.
something catching you. It also reminded me of a few years ago. My wife and I were at a restaurant, and a few tables away, we saw this other man and woman at a restaurant, both on their cell phones, not talking to each other. And then one of them pinged her. I said to her, "I bet you he's texting her just 2 feet away."
Yeah, it could very well. I've drawn that for. I've been in Tokyo and other places, and you see young people on the phone together,
Yeah.
and that's what they're doing. They're in a coffee shop or ice cream place. So their world is going to be a lot different than ours.
Yeah.
And some of it's influenced by the pandemic. Where you got liberated from your carol.
Yeah.
So you have a table now in a coffee shop.
Yeah.
You got liberated. I don't have to be in the office.
Yeah.
And I don't have to go to one Xerox machine on the floor. I have one in my office. So a lot of it is isolation. We're building silos, like for disciplines. We're getting more specific. Health is getting, my finger hurts. It's my little finger. Go to that doctor who does little fingers. I mean, we're over specialized, and everything is now in a silo. It's less. I don't know. I walk around the University of Colorado, and the students are looking down, and their earphones are in. There's no hi, how are you? Where are you from?
Right.
There's none of that anymore.
Yeah, I remember it's the first time I saw someone with one of those earbuds or whatnot. I was working and I saw a woman pass by. She was talking to herself. I thought she was schizophrenic, but no, that's just the way it is now. Let me talk about something that the way human beings try to handle crises or prepare for the future. I know my dad, who was born in 1916, he died in 83. Probably the job that he held, not the longest, but that he had the most fond memories of, was working in the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s in the Great Depression. And that's a great example because you can go anywhere in the park system and see, many examples of good works, the building of highways, the building of trails, fire breaks that they made for really well planned and of a great service. And I saw in looking you up that you had written about the RLC, and here's an example with the Soviets, which aside from global warming itself, was probably the most preventable and most ridiculous environmental tragedy of the last 100 years. So we can do good, but even in preparing for stuff for the next generations, we could, stumble our way and create more RLC disasters. Well, what is your take on what happened in the Soviet Union there, and also how do we not repeat those same mistakes?
Oh, I think it has to do with leadership. The RLC was in a lifetime. I mean, it was in 1954 when Stalin said, let's take the water coming out of Afghanistan and Uzbekistan and Iran, and let's use it to irrigate because we need cotton for our factories in the north. Okay, so
Mhm.
these were basically their satellite states: Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, etc., Kazakhstan, and yeah, Tajikistan too. So there are five of them, five of these provinces, and they made two major rivers that fed the Aral Sea. They diverted them to death, so that the sea didn't get enough water to balance against evaporation and all that, and so the sea slowly disappeared. And I went to meetings where they were talking about reversing the flow of rivers into the Arctic
Uh-huh.
in Russian rivers
Yeah.
to bring the water back to Central Asia to water the desert. And they said, this guy, engineer, famous leader, he held up his hand, he said, not one drop of water from those rivers will go to save the Aral Sea. Because Aral Sea was a desert. It was in a desert, sea in a desert. It'd been there for millennia and millennia, and come and gone. And every time they did some irrigation, eventually the soil would be ruined, salinated, and they have to go to another piece of the desert. Or they have to flush the soil 4 times before they could grow a crop. They just wasted the water in these areas. Now the sea is dead. It's been dead. It's virtually most of it's been dead. So what happens is they want now to save the sea. They want to ask for people around the world to put money into a fund to bring the sea back.
Mm.
You'll never bring the sea back. There was a fund to save the sea, and they lost the sea. They used the money for other things. And they killed off a fishing industry, 60,000 jobs. And now desert, just desert. And the water barely makes it to the delta,
Yeah.
the river delta. So my argument is save the delta, because there you have something, your flora, fauna, nature, and make it a resort and bring people there to look at the rusted ships that
So,
got trapped. Sorry.
no problem. So let me talk about the system of democracy itself, because we've been seeing with Trump and going through the process of the courts and all the endless lawsuits over firing people and doing this and doing that, uh, him trying to unilaterally declare war with Iran rather than Congress, even though it's been 70 years since we had, or 80 years since we had an actual declared war. Do you think that democracy, as currently practiced, whether it's forms of republic or even more direct democracies or parliamentary democracies, do they react too slowly? I mean, is the human form of governance and governments, is it not up necessarily to the task to because we human beings tend not to think long term. Corporations famously think of the next quarter. Uh, you know, is it just an inherent failure, do you think, of human governance?
No, I think it's humans, and it's politics. We are told there are three branches of government, checks and balances. All right.
Hmm.
The fact is, there's one branch now. We've let it become one branch. So you have elected officials in the Congress of one party that has given their power to budgets and tariffs and declare wars and things like that, given it to the executive. The Supreme Court was a third branch, usually viewed as the scale of justice. However, there had been talk about expanding the court in order to dominate by one party or another.
Yeah.
It didn't have to expand the court from 9 people to 15 or 13. All you had to do was to get 6 people. So, in other words, you could probably retire the 3 liberals, because on very controversial votes, it's usually the 6 conservative versus the 3 liberal. And it's going to be that way until some dynamic changes. So I think we're operating under myths. The myth of we the people. If you were to if you were to edit the Constitution,
Yeah.
it would be now I the people, I Donald Trump, I the president, whoever it is, the people. Okay, and in the Constitution, I don't know if the Indians got any votes, any recognition as citizens. African Americans did. There's 3/5 of a person. I mean, all kinds of things. They're myths that we are taught about civic society and civil responsibility, and the courts are there, and every judge is neutral. And none of that is true. Now you say, I mean, in the old days, did we talk about, oh, that was a red judge versus a blue judge?
Yeah.
Is that pointed by Reagan? Oh, that was pointed by Reagan. Oh, this one was pointed by Obama. So you kind of prejudge them by who appointed them. So I think it's about human nature. People, our Congress is a bit like the Russian Duma or President Xi's Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the guy that's going to raise their hand on the GOP? I mean, where there'll be a collection outside of an odd person going against the grain. So my feeling is it's a bit of human nature playing out in a political system. It doesn't make a difference how neutral the courts are if it takes so much is being done now that is undemocratic and against the Constitution. Take, for example, the emolument clause.
Yeah.
That was obvious from day one that was not going to be pursued. I mean, and they didn't pursue a challenge on it.
Yeah.
Why not? And now we're at $450 million free airplane that is, for some reason, in the agreement, is going to be given to Trump afterwards, as a gift, when those gifts are supposed to stay that belong to us, the people.
But let's talk, though, globally, because we talk about global warming, not just America warming.
Yeah.
Even with America being lost, at least maybe until after Trump goes, but even then, I'm not a big fan of the Democrats. I think they're the do-nothing party versus the evil party. But so how does the rest of the world, and even those people here in the U.S., how do we get away from this now-centric bias that we have and actually think about the coming generations? Because we hear all this talk, oh, we're pro-family, we want a mommy and a daddy and 2.2 kids and
nuclear family.
Yeah, how do we get away from this now-centric bias and think about our grandkids, or great-grandkids, great-great-grandkids, etc.?
They discount them. They're discounted. We discount what our grandparents knew. I mean, we don't really know the contribution of the people on whose shoulders we're standing. Mm-hmm. So even in a discipline now, you don't go back very far and stuff like that. So I don't know. I mean, I personally, I think the nuclear family, if you look at Africa, which they say from which we all came, in many societies, they're polygamous. Mm-hmm. The father is a biological accident. It happens. Yeah. They have a kid. But it's the woman that does the farming, and she, with the kids, are nuclear families now, and the father is extra. That's how I see it. And we're told that the best thing is the man and woman and the kids, no matter what the man is like or what the family arrangement is. That reigns supreme. But that doesn't give you more virtue there are lots of books written about the differences and values of nuclear family versus single parenting versus whatever else. I was single parented, so I don't know. My father. I was single parent since I was, say, 4.
Uh-huh.
So I turned out this way. Somebody else, my brother didn't.
So you are 85, so you've surpassed the average life expectancy of a male human being on this planet by a few years. I'm 60. On 20 plus years, hopefully I'll hit there. I'm wanting to go to 100, but I'm wondering.
I'll interview you
Yeah.
when you hit 85.
Okay. Well, you'll be pushing the
Okay.
record then. But I'm wondering if one of the things that could more facilitate generational awareness of needs is that someone who's 25 or 30, the age of to vote is 18, used to be 21. Do we need to put get rid of this gerontocracy, put a cap on how old someone can be to serve? Because in my lifetime, you had Ronald Reagan, Joe Biden, and now Donald Trump. Three presidents clearly suffering from different forms of dementia, but and Trump has other psychological issues too. But these are 3 clearly men whose brains just go into fog, and they just. Do we need to say, you can't serve past the age of 70, so that you can't run past the age of 66 or whatnot, because you'd have to be kicked out? That would seem to be, to me, a way to facilitate the passing of the torch, because you have, look at all the senators you have. Chuck Schumer's in his late 70s. Nancy Pelosi's pushing 80. And you have all the Republicans, most of them, the big name ones that you at least know of, are in their 70s. Do you think that fostering a more egalitarian system via age, that we need to put a cap on the age of politicians?
I think that's a good idea, to limit the age of politicians. I think that the terms in office should be limited.
Yeah.
For Congress people. They get to learn the system, then they know it, and then so I can see that. But in terms of running a country, I said there's got to be something higher to aspire to than the presidency. And maybe it's a council of elders.
Yeah.
Maybe these older guys, if you took after 75, say, you just pluck them out, everybody over 75, you're going to be on this council of elders, advising, say anything you want, vote, do whatever you want, but you're not in charge of agencies and stuff. But I don't know. I think I don't know if younger people are. If you take away the memory loss and dementia and stuff like that, I don't know as younger people are more tolerant and understanding. If you look at someone like Stephen Miller, and I mean, to have him president would be a total disaster. I mean, he's got an arrogance that maybe some of the older people don't have. An arrogance. I don't know. There's still human nature that we have to deal with, and people, develop in different ways. But I think capping the presidency to keep them sharper, and have the 3 real branches of government. How do you get back to 3 branches of government that are checks and balances? Mm-hmm. How do you get back to that? How do you get back to the Supreme Court where they can't grift? They're grifters as well. I made a photo of a mock photo of the Supreme Court, and between Thomas and Sotomayor, I added Mrs. Thomas, because she was like he could be gone. He's doing what she says. So my feeling is, I think we have to get back to basics. And if the Constitution is the basics, at least some things in the Constitution, we're violating everything. Each president chips away a little bit at the what's acceptable. And now we've got a rogue president who doesn't read, doesn't listen to anybody, and changed his mind at a second. So, but you know, if you go to the workplace, let's look at a workplace, and you see the different generations. The 23-year-old looks at the generations behind him, okay, in a different way than my generation looks at those that followed that I'm following.
Yeah.
So he's looking up or she's looking up, I'm looking down. And he's going, well, these people, I can't even get rid of, I can't get a job. I can't get to the next level, you know. And I'm free agent. I can say whatever I want now. But before, I'm not looking for another grant. I'm not looking for another award. I'm not driven by my discipline to have one more paper or one more, you know, get that Nobel Prize. And my feeling is we have to understand these differences. I mean, I talk to young people, and sometimes it's hard. They think I'm old, and I can't even get the university to let me teach because they think I'm too old. So experience is down the drain.
Yeah.
And is my experience relevant anymore?
Well, I mean, I think most experience, you know, we haven't changed that much. It's not like we've morphed into another species in just 50 or 60 years. So I think there are some elemental truths that we have about the human experience, which is what I wanted to ask next about. What do you think are the ethics and the consequences of us not acting to make the future better, especially with things whether it's the big things like global warming or whether it's social infrastructure? What do you see? You know that in an ethical light?
I mean, I think that there are people devoted to ethics and equity and justice, social justice issues, even if the government isn't going to support them. That continues. Okay, there are religious leaders who are in the middle, who are not, you know, politicized, let's say, or weaponized, to use their phrase. But I just think I don't know how to deal with it, to tell you quite honestly. If we're being tainted by what goes on now, or, you know, I'm tainted now by my last several decades. But now we have a Trump who's getting rid of whistleblowers. I'm a whistleblower. I have that mentality. I see myself as a do-gooder. I've seen the environment change to where do-gooders have to be silent.
Oh, I've lost jobs because I've spoken out about things too. You know?
Yes. So I think that continues. But I think now it's particularly tough. How do you, as an American scientist interested in global warming, how do you continue your research or your speaking out about it? You have to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I go to garage sales on Saturday. That's my day off,
Yeah.
basically, from looking at other people's stuff. And I came across a young guy, probably in his early 30s, and a moving sale, an apartment. So I said, oh, where are you moving? And he says, oh, I'm moving to England. Oh, you are? What'd you do? What do you do, you know? And he said, I'm an atmospheric chemist. I work at NOAA. I was in that probation period, the 2-year probation, when Musk said all probation people in health, every place, wherever they were, is easy target, low-hanging fruit. They just got in, throw them out.
Yeah.
So, and he got a job offer in England. So he's not going to be here helping us. So, and in Germany, I heard they've set up a place for Americans who are leaving to study. So I just think that, this is going to absorb. I've had offers at 85 to come to Russia or to come to China. I've done a lot with Russia. I don't do anything with it now. I'm doing a lot with China, you know. In fact, just because I was working with China, another scientist went to the university and said, I was paid by the Chinese to do my research. And I had to get a lawyer to defend myself to show that that was bogus. Okay, it was just an engineer. We had a chat for 30 minutes and he made these claims about me. So the work environment in the workplace, at least at my university, is pretty hard. I'm not enamored by CU. I didn't go here, and that's the way it is. But I'm worried about the future. I'm a survivor. I try to survive and help people how to beat the system without breaking it, using bending rules but not breaking them and things like that. Writing letters, speaking out, protest when you can, but make sure when you do that the people you're protesting to can handle what you're saying.
Yeah.
If you want to speak, you've seen it yourself, I'm sure. Speaking truth to power has consequences.
Yeah.
After 34 years at NCAR, running the social impacts group, they used the budget cut to get rid of my group because they couldn't get rid of a tenured person, which I was, unless they get rid of the group. So they get rid of a small group working in Africa. And I should say, it was written up in the New York Times 4 days later. I can send you the articles. And it was written up in science section saying small group saving babies in Africa kind of story was cut by this research center. And I got the Clinton Global Initiative. They gave me $1 million to move my group. And most people were from Colorado, so I stayed here and moved it down to the university. So I was fired because I was complaining that the center was run by Mugabe, who ran Zimbabwe into the ground. So I was challenging the science to get more social, and they just use it to get rid of the social.
Yeah.
And now NCAR's on the chopping block. It gets money from NSF.
So
I don't know if you knew that, 110 million or something. And now their budget, NSF's budget's been cut in half, more than half, and they're cutting their budget more than half. Where are these scientists going to go? So it talks about ethics and equity. I'm more at the survival level. Global warming, I've been to many of the IPCC meetings, and I've just written about it, and I've written that the IPCC, it's there, for those who know, it's the Conference of Party 30 is going to be in Brazil. 30. For 30 years, the government's getting together to stop the increase in carbon dioxide emissions to the atmosphere. 30 years, every year, and other meetings in between. What's new? They haven't stopped it, not 1 part per million of CO2 in 30 years. Not one. It's at 400 and something now.
Yeah.
Not 1 part per million. But what they've done, cleverly, is the rich countries come up with funds. First, it was funds to adapt. How are you going to adapt to climate change if you have more drought, less drought? Now, they've given up on adaptation, and it's funds for loss and damage.
Yeah.
They'll never be able to pay for the loss and damage for developing countries around the globe.
Yeah, there was an interesting book a few years ago called "The Coming Uninsurable World," with the chaos with weather. But you just before we go, let me just ask you one final thing. Is there anything that you wanted to say in regard of this subject matter that you haven't said yet?
Well, there are a lot of issues. My concern are very simple charts like this one. You've seen it. If you type up intergenerational characteristics, you get various charts where they give the the dates of the different generations,
Yeah.
and then characteristics on the side, year born, traits, characteristics and stereotypes, preferences, styles, etc. So for me, I was going to get a job from 9 to 5 in company and work there for probably 30 years, maybe change once. Okay, I was going to have a house, going to have kids, nuclear family kind of thing, get 2 weeks in the summer for vacation. Go to a kid today and say, oh, well, you got to be in 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, hour for lunch, blah, blah. No, I don't want to do that. I'd like to work Mondays, actually from 4 to midnight. You know, I don't want to be in an office. I don't need the office. I work better alone. I can work in groups. They're very different characteristics.
Yeah.
I grew up with a typewriter, okay, and now it's all computer, and now it's the iPhone screwed up a lot of things. Now artificial intelligence is going to be the new generation's thing, you see, and so we started with radio and fax machine and stuff like that. So my feeling is the times are changing, and they are changing, according to Dylan. And each generation, the generation is shortening. It's not like it used to be for us 20 years. About 20 years was a generation.
Yeah.
Now, according to, now it went to, I think it is 15 years.
Yeah.
So 15-year-old is already getting sharp. Some of them are winning awards with chemistry and things like that, to inventing things. And then there's 15 to 30, 30 to 45, 45 to 60. It's that 30 to 60 is the tight zone. You know, I want their job. I want to go higher. You know, there's pressure to push up, pressure to keep them down because I don't want him taking my job, but I want that job and stuff like that. There are all kinds of issues in the workplace. And these charts are plentiful. It's interesting to type in and not go to the websites, go to images, and you'll get all these, a plethora of these charts. And they use different characteristics to compare, you know, that kind of thing. It's not about money for millennials now,
Yeah.
you know. In our time, it was, we're going to be a billionaire by the time, a millionaire, not even millionaire by the time I'm 30. Didn't happen. You know, stuff like that.
Well, it seems that I know in my lifetime, just in the 40 plus years or so that I've been working in various corporate stuff, there isn't even encouraged the older generation to help the younger generation. There's no sort of thing as a master apprentice relationship. It's like now the kids come out of college. There are so many of them. They just throw them in jobs, and it's either sink or swim.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there's no life preserver if they don't make it.
Yeah, but it's like now what they did with AID, they fired people immediately.
Yeah.
Right, and then they want to use some of these people because there's some programs. Oh, we can't really get rid of that one.
Yeah.
You know, they like in health, we can't really get rid. So I had to bring them back.
But on a gig economy thing, that you know, they changed the structure of what the job is. That you know, it's like maybe a 6 month job, you know, and then it might be renewed for another 6 months.
Right, and they're brought back. The older ones are brought back to train a young person who's cheaper.
Yeah.
They bring him back as a consultant, show him your job. Okay, without the history, you know, all that's gone.
Yeah.
And so they bring them back, and then they fire. I know someone at AID that was fired 3 times, rehired 3 times, and terminated. Terminated 4, rehired 3. Oh, we didn't think of that. Because they're backing into the future. And I think what's happening now is it is a backing into the future. It's like Trump wants things that he liked from the 50s or 1890s, basically, the tariffs of McKinley, you see. And that was when we picked up the Philippines and Guam and Cuba. We almost got Cuba too, you know. So it was all about territorial gains, you know, that kind of thing. Anyway, I think we have to realize we don't have 3 branches of government in terms of that. And this in itself is going to damage, it's whatever the leader thinks is important, and it isn't science, and it isn't public policy, it isn't public health, it's Bitcoin, it's trade, it's funding.
Well, I want to thank you for spending over an hour speaking about it, Mickey Glantz. I'll link to your university page there for anyone who's interested in finding out more about you. So thank you for your time.
Sure, yeah, I think they'll keep it up for a while.
Okay.
No, I'm still going. Don't worry, I'm not going away. Okay, take care.
Okay, thank you.